זה רשת חברתית שמבחינת מספר המשתמשים שלה, היא בהחלט מהנמוכה ביותר, אני חושב שאפילו רדיט תקפו אותם, יש להם רק 390 מיליון משתמשים, אבל היא הצליחה לקבע את עצמה כרשת חברתית, אולי בגלל הגריין הזה שמשותף בה עם טוויטר, סליחה, עם אינסטגרם, זה האימג', זה התמונה, זה הגרפי שבא מלפנים, ובפייסבוק זה הרשת החברתית, זה המעגל מסביב, הנטוורק שבא מלפנים, בטוויטר זה המילה הכתובה, וזה גם התחיל מ-140 תווים, זאת אומרת, זה גם אילץ את המשתמש, למצות את העיקר ואת המקסימום ממספר מאוד מוגבל של תווים, אז זה הפך לי מין רשת חברתית של המילה הכתובה, ובאופן טבעי או פחות טבעי, זה פשוט הפך להיות רשת חברתית שמזוהה יותר עם אינטלקטואליה, מזוהה יותר עם המרחב הפוליטי, עם המרחב העיתונאי, עם המרחב המדעי. אז מבחינת משתמשים, לרשת הזאת יש בהחלט מה לשפר, הם מהנמוכים ביותר. מבחינת הווייב שהרשת הזאת יוצרת, היא נמצאת במרכז השיח העולמי, בכל מה שקשור בשיח על רשתות חברתיות, כי פשוט כל ה-movers and shakers של האינדסטרי נמצאים כיוזרים בטוויטר ומתבטאים בטוויטר. אז בעולמות שלכם, עולמות העיתונות שנושקים לעולמות הפוליטיקה והמדע והתרבות והחברה, מבחינת טוויטר, העיתונאים הם ה-number one users של הרשת החברתית הזאת, ולכן כבר ב-2015 היה קל יחסית לפתות את טוויטר להגיע לישראל בדרג בכיר. So just to wrap up the intro, Twitter was honored to come to Israel in return with a significant presence, a high-level executive, in return for seeing a large number of the leading journalists in Israel. And this was in 2015 when us in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs understood the importance of Twitter in setting up the agenda, at least on the public sphere. So now for me, it's a closing of a circle. I am speaking with journalists again on Twitter, about Twitter, but this time not as a diplomat, but as a private person with a company that actually develops tools and methodologies to help individuals and companies understand the benefit of Twitter and advance their narratives on this platform. And something else that I do and enjoy very much is speaking with others. So without further ado, with your permission, if everything is okay, we'll move on to the presentation and we'll start. Just as a preparation for the rest to come, I'm going to share with you on chat right now a link to a Google form where you can all put your Gmail addresses and Twitter accounts, and this is where I'm going to open a shared folder and put all the material that you're going to see today and in the next 3 sessions. And I'm going to open a discussion group for the questions, and I'm sure there will be, so I can answer them in private or public, depending on how it will come, in between our webinar sessions. We're speaking about Twitter. This webinar will have 4 sections. And in each section, we're going to try and provide you guys a bit of the most effective tools that we can put together without any one of you needing to put money and buy and purchase services somewhere else. And these tools were collected together over a period of almost 5 years, multiple encounters with Twitter executives, both in Europe and in San Francisco, and encounters with industry leaders that are partnering with Twitter to work with brands and trying to, let's say, harness the power of Twitter. What we've done is we've collected all those lessons in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and wrapped them up in a 16-hour course that we gave to ambassadors that are leaving for taking their new positions and cadets in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Academy to enable young diplomats and even older ones to rapidly, within months, maintain a Twitter account that is capable of impacting the public agenda in the countries that they're sent to. So everything that we're going to pass in this presentation, starting from the first chapter, effective tweeting, going through the second and third and fourth chapter, where we're going to speak about advanced search and automation and hacks and tools, these are all lessons collected over a period of few years that are all intended to provide the user with ways of becoming more impactful and more synergetic with the Twitter matrix as a whole. So let's start with the first chapter, effective tweeting. What we're going to cover here are 5 steps that are empirically validated throughout research that Twitter themselves have done, and others are through sampling data in massive scales, trying to understand what works better. So the first and the most important, to my opinion, although it takes time to understand the importance of it and to feel it yourself when you're using Twitter, is the use of hashtags. Now, hashtags, not so many people know it. Hashtags are a Twitter invention. Today, they're being used by all social media platforms. Facebook have copied from it first. Instagram, definitely, they even say they have copied the hashtags from the concept of hashtags from Twitter. But Twitter themselves, when they launched in 2006 and 2007, they were more or less public. They didn't start with hashtags themselves. Hashtags were actually proposed to Twitter by Twitter users. And as you will see when we advance in the presentation, many of the, or at least a considerable amount of the features that Twitter used and use today were features proposed by their own users. So what you see here is the tweet by Chris Messina from 2007, and that was the actual proposition, the first time Twitter was proposed on Twitter with a tweet to use hashtags as a way of grouping up topics or groups of people. And why is it important, hashtags? Because hashtags on Twitter are drawers. These are the spontaneous closets where all conversations related to a topic are stored at. That means when you type a hashtag into Twitter, Twitter automatically hyperlinks it and connects it in a view with all other conversations that have been marked by their authors to be related to that subject. So if we're covering now the do's and don't do's of hashtags, the first most important rule, and this is almost counterintuitive to the natural use of hashtags, is avoid inventing new hashtags. Because when you're inventing a new hashtag, you're basically telling Twitter, create a new drawer. And in that drawer, put only my tweet. Anyone who will click that new hashtag that you invented will see only your tweet inside. the best practice on Twitter is to actually find the existing drawer that bunches together all the conversation on the topic that you're about to tweet on, and make sure your tweet appears on that drawer, because most of the Twitter users, or at least the power users of Twitter, they are listening. They are literally visiting again and again certain topical drawers and sampling what's new in them. And when we will cover the search, you will see how powerful those drawers can be for someone who has a specific interest in covering a specific topic. So the first lesson, or the first tip that I can give you about hashtags is don't invent one. Try and join an existing one. And I've put here two examples. The first is a tweet from a Spanish speaker who thought it would be cool to invent some new COVID-19 hashtags. He's using a middle point, which is already a very difficult letter to find. It's not available on any of the keyboards. And what happens if we click those hashtags and ask Twitter, please open the hashtag drawer for COVID-19, you'll see that that drawer contains very few tweets inside. That means that that person who actually tweeted with using that hashtag drawer, COVID-19, makes very little sense for the rest of the people trying to understand what this conversation is about, because that drawer is empty. There's only him and two others using that drawer. But and of course, it's going to be the same if we're trying the SARS middle.cov2 and the corona.v. These are non-existing drawers. But for example, if we're taking one of the most popular drawers for COVID-19, we're going to see that this is a very, very live type of drawer with conversations practically every second. This tweet is from 4 seconds ago, and if we'll refresh, we'll see other tweets coming in that drawer. So choosing your drawer or choosing your hashtag is extremely important. It means the difference, between being discovered right away and being relevant to a certain topic of conversation, and being forgotten somewhere where your tweet has no exposure or very little exposure to others. How do we actually do this? How do we find existing topics of conversation? So the secret to it is to actually type your tweet in advance and then find the words that may refer to the topic, and then add the hashtag before them once they're already written. When you do that, Twitter will open a drawer with all the existing hashtags pertaining to that specific word. And the best is just to choose from the existing one in the drawer. And I prepared for you a small example. Of course, all this is going to be shared with you, and you're going to have all this clickable presentation for yourself, and you can continue to practice. But please do stop me if there's any questions, maybe through the chat. So this example, we're opening a tweet directly on Twitter. It's the exact same tweet as the small animation in the presentation. The weather in Paris is beautiful today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a hashtag just before the word weather. And the minute I've done this, Twitter opened this drawer. And from this drawer, they put all the existing hashtags that have reunited lots of conversations under. Of course, the first is weather cloud. Now, this would be, according to Twitter, the most used, but it doesn't mean I have to choose the first. If I can, of course, I'm going to join my tweet to a much more popular drawer, but anyone from the first 5 or 6 would be enough to go to the right category and already be exposed to other users. So of course, in this case, if I'm talking about weather in Paris, I can choose the weather hashtag, and let's say put a hashtag in front of Paris, and I see that Paris is a very popular drawer for conversation. And if I would have tweeted this tweet right now, my tweet would have been categorized in 2 popular drawers, one for speaking about weather and the other for speaking about Paris. So my tweet would be relevant to anyone tweeting about Paris and anyone tweeting about weather. I'm going to try and make a methodical stop here and see if there's any questions. You can simply put them in the chat if you do, and I'll refer to them as we go. So since I don't see any questions in the chat, I'll move on. Second, very important lesson about using hashtags. Remain topically focused. Twitter themselves publish from time to time recommendations that they have on how to best use their platform. And they themselves say that the best use of hashtags is using 2 per tweet. Now, these recommendations are based on how they analyzed millions and millions of conversations happening on every given moment on Twitter and measuring, and they do this every end of the year. They publish some results and some tips on what works and what doesn't. What they saw is that if you're overclouding your tweet with many hashtags, you're becoming a little bit scattered with the topics. It's true that you will appear on all drawers, but probably you're going to have less relevance for each and every drawer. What they recommend is focus your tweets on 1 or 2 most important topical drawers or topical hashtags, and that will increase significantly the ability of other users to make sense of that tweet and to continue on the conversation referring to that tweet. So in this example, I show a tweet that has spread itself over 6 or 7 hashtags. And of course, there's hardly any engagement with it, while another tweet focusing itself on COVID-19 and vaccine as 2 topical drawers. And of course, it already draws a lot of, not a lot, but much more attention. The third topic for hashtags is avoid stacking them. Now, I'm sure each and every one of you have already seen this practice of actually writing what you have to say, and then just to be sure, stacking all the hashtags that you think may have relevance on the bottom. Now, the reason why this is not recommended is not because it's actually confronts any type of algorithmic standard within Twitter. The reason here is more psychological. It already is a little bit more time-consuming for our brain to decipher text right away, because our brains work much more intuitively on images. Now, what we're doing is when we're putting hashtag stacking, we're confusing the brains of the people who are seeing our tweets on their feed. And stacking like that creates a chatter that doesn't allow your sentence to jump forward. So it's highly discouraged using this type of stacking. What is more encouraged is to weave in your hashtags into your sentence and allow the brain to decipher the hashtags as part of the sentence. It's much more easy for the brain to do this rather than putting a hashtag cloud. Before I move to the next section, I'm going to do another methodical stop, going through the questions and see if there's any interesting questions. Okay, so Aviu, the hashtag suggestions work only on Twitter, not TweetDeck, right? Actually, it works on TweetDeck. TweetDeck is also a Twitter tool. The only thing, if I understand right, the suggestion is that little drawer that I mentioned. That drawer doesn't open on TweetDeck. It's uniquely on the mobile experience of Twitter and on the web experience of Twitter. To the best of my recollection, TweetDeck does not open that drawer suggestion. So it's going to be a little bit less advantageous to at least tweet through TweetDeck. Of course, TweetDeck has a lot of advantages in monitoring, and we'll cover that in our last session. But for tweeting itself, your best tools for tweet are from mobile experience and from web experience. Any other questions? I'm going to do a 10-second stop. מה לגבי עברית? Okay. When it comes to Hebrew, the natural use of hashtags is a little bit more challenging in Hebrew. And the reason is because Hebrew is less accommodating for connected words. And we spoke about this challenge on many occasions with Twitter. Because in Hebrew we're using terminal letters, and some of them, when you're using them in hashtags, it makes it a little bit more difficult to figure out the combination of 2 or 3 words that make a hashtag. There's a trend that started spontaneously by users in Hebrew to use underscores and separate hashtag words within the hashtag with a hashtag underscore. Now, the concept of using hashtags and the little suggestion drawer, it works in Hebrew, although the popular use of hashtags in the Hebrew sphere on Twitter is not exactly how Twitter intended it to be. There could be many reasons why, and to my gut feeling, one of the most important reasons is the fact that Twitter did not really catch on in Israel, at least not in the public. And when it started catching on, it was way after Instagram. And Instagram, although copying the concept of hashtags from Twitter, they took it to a different place. And now what we see mostly in Hebrew-speaking Twitter is use of hashtags a little bit like more on Instagram. It goes against the DNA of Twitter, but it's permissible. I'm going through the other questions. Of course, Stav is mentioning that in Hebrew at least, the hashtags can be used for framing, misgur, framing of a topic. And again, this is a natural occurring phenomenon in the Hebrew-speaking Twitter sphere, using the hashtags a little bit more like in Instagram rather than in Twitter, or at least the English-speaking Twitter. But definitely be aware that in Hebrew, hashtags can be used to frame a topic or a subject. But knowing that hashtags are drawers, when you put when you're talking about framing or misgur, it actually functions a little bit as a topical drawer, because when you put a frame, when you put a misgeret on top of a subject, you've actually collected it into a drawer. Can you see my presentation again?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. We're moving on to the next very important topic. To my opinion, although most experts will say that hashtags is the key element that makes Twitter so pivotal to the journalistic or political or professional spheres, to my personal experience and opinion, this second topic that I'm going to cover, the mentions, is probably the most powerful, and I will explain. So first of all, mentions too were not part of the Twitter experience when Twitter started. It was also suggested by users, and it came out of a natural need of people to be able to refer to other people's conversation and have them know that I actually have something to say. Let's say I tweeted something and someone wants to comment on my tweet. When Twitter started, the comment was in itself another non-related tweet. And people started feeling the need to actually make other people that we refer to understand and be aware of the fact that we have something to say for what they just said. And what you're seeing here is the first tweet ever using the @ to refer to another user. Of course, when Twitter started, and at that point in 2007, when this tweet was released, Coda or Omelas did not really know that Brad actually commented unless he searched for his username. Just later on in 2009, Twitter added a natural link and a notification to the original tweet author that someone has just commented or referred to him on another tweet. So the @ is our ability to make sure that other Twitter users that we're referring to in our tweet are being aware that we have something to say. And let me show you why this feature of Twitter is so powerful. The topic here is solicit attention, and this is just one of millions of examples happening every day. What we have here is a fairly known account, Everyday Astronaut, not that big, but definitely not too big. This is an account with a couple of 100,000 followers. What they did is they tweeted to SpaceX and Elon Musk with a proposition of making a shirt. Now, when in our next lesson, we'll show you how to see how many people refer or mention or tag someone else. Elon Musk receives millions and millions of tags any given day. How do one get the ability to get a response from Elon Musk? So what you see here, that's the original tweet, and this is the response Elon Musk replied to their tweet. The ability to do that is through the use of @. When you're using the @, you're making sure Elon Musk is aware that you tweeted to them. Now, of course, Elon Musk will get a notification. And if your tweet is not viral, there's very little chance that Elon Musk has been in front of his Twitter feed at the moment where your tweet was notified. But when you get 80,000.3 likes, Elon Musk's Twitter account received 18,000 notifications. And if it goes viral for the next 24 hours, that means Elon Musk's feed is flooded with your tweet, and it floats your tweet to Elon Musk's attention, and it makes your tweet more visible than anything else, and it stimulates Elon Musk's reply. Now, why am I saying this? Because in my experience working 5 years with Israeli diplomats in at least 4 highly popular Twitter arenas, North America, East Asia, Europe, and South America, this feature in itself was probably the most relevant when it comes to setting a public agenda through Twitter. Because when you're using correctly your tagging, when you're using correctly your mentioning, whenever you refer to someone, whether it's in a flattering manner or an embarrassing manner, when you're referring to that someone and you have something in, or an institution, by the way, but when you're referring to someone, use their @sign. Because when you are using their @sign and what you have to say involves and opinionates a large amount of people, you're actually drawing that someone or that institution, you're luring them into an arena where you set the stage and you're forcing them to a reply. A reply could be forced positively or negatively. You can flatter someone and force them into a reply, but you can also put someone on the stake and force them into a reply. Now, why that reply is very important? Because your tweets are primarily shared with your own followers, and your primary interest is to leave your bubble or your echo chamber and sort out into other people's echo chambers. You want to pinch that bubble anytime with every tweet. You want to pinch your bubble and go to someone else's bubble, and this is how you grow your followers. So when you're using the @sign intelligently, each and every tweet, you're setting an arena, and if you're tweeting something that becomes viral, you're forcing that someone that you tweeted against into a conversation, and the minute they reply, like Elon Musk here, you're taking your tweet into Elon Musk's followers. And what happens is anything else that is being built on the reply tweet, and in this case 15.9 thousand, are coming not from everyday astronaut followers, they are coming from Elon Musk's followers. And of course, from that number, there is a certain percentage that goes back as followers to everyday astronaut. And that's how you literally use a daily tweeting routine, depending on the topics and subjects you're treating within your work. Every time you're talking about an entity that has a Twitter account, your interest is to use their @signs within your tweet and draw them into a public conversation. I'm checking again the questions. No more questions, so we're moving on. Again, like in hashtags, it's actually disencouraged. It's not prevented by Twitter, but it's highly disencouraged to do mention stacking. It's actually considered tacitly as a spammy behavior. Now, Twitter doesn't block it because it really goes to the core of what makes Twitter so advantageous. But the reason why I will give you not to use it is more psychological than anything related to spam. I'm sure some of you have already seen their name tagged in a tag stack like that. My first impression when I get tagged like that, and this is a tweet where someone actually put me in a tag cloud, my first impression is, oh, again, someone is bunching me up with everyone else. Some of them I know, some of them I don't. each and every one of us, we don't like being stacked with everyone else. We are much more inclined to give personal attention when someone is personally referring to us. And in this case, the reason why I show you this tweet is the person who's tweeting it is actually a very popular person on Twitter with almost 50,000 followers. Now, my natural inclination would be if someone with 50,000 followers wants my attention, I'll invest the 20 seconds and read the tweet and maybe the link following with it. But in this case, this type of tweets, and I saved it when it happened because I show it in all of my conferences. When it happens, you're actually losing your advantage of who you are and how popular your account or yourself are, and you're just forcing the users that are being stacked to ignore you, thinking I'm not unique enough for you to take the time to tweet to me. So this is highly disencouraged and even considered a spammy behavior by Twitter. The best way of using hashtag ad signs, is to actually weave them in your tweet, just like done here. So when you're speaking about SpaceX, use the SpaceX ad sign. And when you're speaking about Elon Musk and you're actually asking him for his reply, use his ad sign almost as if you would use their real name in the tweet. Any questions? Not so far. Okay. Another lesson, very important one when tagging, and this is something we've all seen, but I'm going to explain exactly the reason why it's done. So I'm sure many of you have seen tweets that begin with an ad sign have a small dot in front of them. And the reason why is because when we open a tweet with an ad sign, a username, we're literally making that tweet, instead of a mention tweet, into a reply tweet. And the difference between the two I'll show in a moment. What you see here are two tweets that look exactly the same. Only one of them has a dot sign before the at sign. And at that moment, that tweet became a mention. If I do the same tweet without the dot sign, it's rendering the tweet as a reply. And to see the difference between mentions and replies, you need to see what the followers of those accounts see. So what we see here is my Hebrew account. And on my feed, on my feed, although we're looking at the tweets of Elad Racon, on my feed you're seeing only the tweet with a dot before the at sign. And that means my followers on their feed will see only this one, not Elad Racon's followers, but Elad Radson with a D followers. The reason is the other tweet, it exists in the tweets and replies section. Here you see them both. So my followers on their feed, they don't see this one. This reply, to see it, my followers will actively need to go into my account. And when it comes to your strategy of tweeting, if you want to reply someone, but that reply does not involve or has no value for the rest of your followers, so definitely you can begin the reply tweet with an at. But say, for example, you've used this strategy to set a stage, and you tweet about a subject, and you're using the at sign of that subject and luring him into a public conversation. And let's say that person replied to you which in this case Elon Musk was replying. If you're replying back because you have an interest of preserving that public conversation, your reply back is best done while putting a dot sign before the @ of the user you're replying back. So you're gonna, instead of clicking the reply on Twitter, sorry, we're going here. So instead of replying to this person with what you have to say, if you want to keep this conversation public with the utmost exposure possible, your best is actually to do a retweet with a quote, and then begin with a dot at the person you're replying to, and then telling them your reply. What you're doing here in this strategy, instead of just replying, you're actually quoting them and then replying with a dot sign and then @ You're making sure with this that they understand you reply to them, but with the dot before, you're actually making that, you are assuring that conversation remains public for everyone to see. And by this method, your replies get the same traction and sometimes even more traction, because people sometimes like the fight. You're making sure your replies keep on diverting public attention on the conversation and the subjects you're speaking about, rather than closing it into a private conversation between you and the person you're replying to, and maybe some fanatics that are specifically making an interest of listening to that conversation. Before moving on to sourcing, any questions about tagging? I'm looking at the panel, so if anyone has a question, that's the time to type it in. Okay, so we move on. Sourcing. This is probably one of the topics that are most relevant to you as journalists, and I will explain why. Many of you work for media outlets, and although when I looked a bit on how many of you use Twitter, I saw that a lot of you are generating conversations, and sometimes you're tweeting about your written material even before it's published, or sometimes alongside publishing without referencing your actual article or published article. But this is important because most of you work within editorial and publishing houses that are using Twitter in a way to solicit audience to read what is generated by your work. And when we speak about sourcing on Twitter, we're speaking about how material and content outside of Twitter is made synergetic to the Twitter matrix. And the reason why this is even a topic of conversation is because one of the most persistent topics that come up year after year on Twitter's discussion with publishers and advertisers is what we call the click-through rates. Twitter is notoriously known for very, very low click-through rates. Click-through rates are, by the way, are the percentage of how many people click on a link that is appearing on a tweet, leaving Twitter to another website. In this particular case, when it comes to your work, it would be to your own newspaper. But it could be any advertiser who wishes to sell something online, or this is a very important question for advertisers, the click-through rates. And Twitter is notoriously known for very low. That means if I'm on Twitter and someone is tweeting even something very interesting with a link to something else outside of Twitter, on average, there's only 1.6% chance that I'll click that link. So all of you who are journalists, you're in a disadvantaged platform where a lot of people come to read what you have to say, but they're very unlikely to click on a link where you complete all the details of what you just have to say. So all of you and myself and many of my diplomat colleagues, we're in a business of trying to convince people to click and read more about what we've just sampled in 280 characters. We want to show people more information, and it's in the public's best interest to read more and be more aware of what we have to say. And in this game, we are on the losing side. So this is why sourcing is particularly important for you journalists. And I will explain. When you share a link on Twitter, and that link or the website where the link originates from has not deliberately and in advance taken care of how their links appear on Twitter, the links that you share would look like this. It would just simply be a URL. That URL will be hyperlinked, and of course, clicking it will go directly to the source. The thing is, this type of sharing is notoriously known to be with very low click-through rates. What does it mean? It means that if you just share a link, most likely people will not click it. So Twitter, after pressure from many big actors in the advertisement industry, they introduced a standard that is copied actually from Facebook. That standard is called Open Graph. And before explaining a little bit more about Open Graph, I'd like to give you a little bit more tips on the bare link sharing. So some of you, and in this case, I see, I gave an example from Ynet. Some of you came to the habit of shortening links through Bitly and other link shorteners when shared on Twitter, thinking that a short link will catch fewer characters from my 280 quota. Therefore, I can write more. This is a very common fallacy that a lot of Twitter users out there are victims of, and I'd like to assure you this is not the case. Any link that you share on Twitter will always cost you 23 characters. No matter if that link is as long as this link for my presentation, or it's a small bitly of 10 characters, both will cost you 23 characters. And the reason why is that when you share a link on Twitter, when people click that link, they're not actually going directly to this link. What they're doing is Twitter is passing any link through their own link shortener. And the way to show you this is I'm going to put my cursor on the archive.org, archive.org link, and I ask you all to take a look at the left bottom corner of my screen. The browser is showing the actual link that will take your browser. If you're all looking to the left bottom corner of my screen and it's visible, I hope it is, it should be, you'll see that the actual link that we're going to is t.co/pxdaqdai and then a question mark and amp1. That means that I'm not actually sharing archive, I'm sharing Twitter's shortcut to archive. And this is how Twitter assures all links are shortened to 23 characters. So there's one small advantage, sharing, it's small and big advantage, sharing your own link to your own website or to the original website, and it comes to branding. It's better when you're referring someone to an article on archive that the person clicking on it will see that he's going to archive. Because if you're sharing an article on Ynet, but you're linking it through Bitly, the most aware users will ask themselves, wait a minute, why do I need to go through a Bitly? Is there a virus there? Is there a JavaScript, a malicious JavaScript there? That why do they need to put me through a Bitly to go to a Ynet article? And this is the big faulty part of this game. If you're sharing a link on New York Times, let users see that you're sharing a link on New York Times. Why pass them through a Bitly? In the benign case, you're going through a Bitly because you want to monitor how many people clicked on your link. In the less benign case, you're going through a Bitly because you're going to pass your users, and I assure you a lot of people do, you're going to pass your users through a silent page where you're going to capture their IP, and then you're going to put your own statistics on top of Twitter's, learning a little bit of the behavior of how people use your Twitter feed. If you want to avoid all those sketchy corners, when you're sharing a link, simply share the original. It doesn't cost you any more, but it does contribute a lot to your credibility. And to be honest, the way you are being interpreted as a professional Twitter users, what Ynet is doing here, this is widely discouraged by all professional actors. And I will show you an example. So we're moving on, and this is the New York Times, for example. And I'll show you why there's a lot of an advantage of sharing your actual links, but preparing them in advance. So as I said before, and I'm going through the questions just to see if I was, so there is a question. I'm using a shortcut like Bitly to follow how many people entered my link. Okay. I was hoping this question will arise. Why you really don't need it is very simple, because you can get much, much more by Twitter's own statistics. And let's take my last tweet, for example. On every tweet that you tweet, you have the statistic measuring sign, and if you click the view all engagements, you'll get way more data than what Bitly is providing you. You'll get how many impressions, how many total engagements, detail expense, how many likes, profile clicks, retweets, hashtag clicks, replies, and what is most important, and this is the only detail that Bitly gives you, is the link clicks. So you're getting from Twitter probably everything you need. The only thing I can think of that Bitly gives you and Twitter doesn't is the IP segmentation of who clicks your links. Now, here it's a balance. If you're in a business and if you're in metaphorical business. If you're if your interest primarily, before thinking about how much credible you are to your followers and to the world with your tweets, if more important is to know the IP of the people clicking your links, then I would say definitely use Bitly or any other link shortener. But I would find it really strange if you need so much the IP that you're willing to hamper your credibility vis-a-vis your followers. The IP should not be that important, at least not more important than the data that you already get from Twitter for every tweet that you're sharing and how many people click that link. I would recommend strongly, unless you really have a particular case, not to use Bitly and not shorten your links. Simply use Twitter's own statistical tool. And in our third lesson, we'll learn how to use that statistics in a much more professional way through the statistical panel rather than on every individual tweet. Did I answer your question? I'm going to look at the questions. So Stav is saying, of course, Twitter has its own Bitly, which is the t.co I've mentioned. I'm looking to see if there's more questions. Another issue with Bitly is that your stats are open for everyone to see. If you add plus to the link, you'll see the full statistics, even for Ynet. I'm not sure I understand. Add plus to which link? Avihu, can you be more specific about the plus? Is it only on Bitly or?
Yeah, no, Bitly specifically, if you're not a pro user, if you link, let's say, any Bitly link from Ynet's Twitter and paste it on your browser and add plus, you'll see the full statistics, how many clicks, hours, stuff like that.
I see. And Avihu, are you handling Twitter's Ynet's Twitter account?
I used to, actually.
I see. There's another thing there for using Bitly that I'm going to explain in a moment. First of all, Twitter's own statistical panel is capable of giving you everything you get from Bitly, other than the IP of the users where they cannot because of privacy. But they do give you man versus woman, they give you age, they give you a lot of statistics, even profession. They give a lot to discourage you or discourage people from using the Bitly link shorteners. The reason why they discourage it is specifically because of that problem that people are more and more aware of how it's easy to divert you through some, shady, invisible link shortener and take information that you not necessarily agreed to be taken. It's very, very visible here in Europe and in the United States. In Israel, it's still not a big issue as I would have hoped it would be. But here in Europe, the GDPR is draconically preventing or inhibiting publishers from doing tricky things like that. And the users are becoming more sophisticated and more aware. I would say if you're handling a publication Twitter account, refrain from using this. At the worst case, you can embed all the code that collects the statistics on your own platform, on Ynet's own platform, and get the same statistics you get from Bitly without taking the client through a third party. So what we're doing here is actually we're sharing a bit.ly link that goes through a Twitter shortening link, t.co, that goes to Ynet's article. We're going 4 stations. This is highly discouraged, and users are getting more and more sophisticated. Use your own links. But now I'm going to show another reason why you want to use your own links. And this is probably the most important to you guys. It's called Twitter cards. Twitter cards are Twitter's own solution for all the demands coming from all the publishers throughout the years. Twitter cards are actually small bits of code that are embedded on the publisher's platform, not on Twitter. And those bits of code tell Twitter what to do with that link to make it as most natural experience within Twitter. And in this case, I show you a publication that uses Twitter cards in a very, very efficient way. It's the New York Times. By the way, in Israel, I couldn't find, among the big publishers, I couldn't even find one that uses Twitter cards efficiently. Most of them actually don't use Twitter cards at all. So to begin with, let's understand what's Twitter cards. Twitter cards are Twitter's way of giving publishers the ability to transform links that have very, very low click-through rate into something a little bit more engaging. And I'll give an example. So let's say I want to tweet about this New York Times article, and I say, hey, look at this. And I'm sharing an article. What happens right away, and it happens automatically, Twitter goes to that article and brings back an image, a title, and a description, saying on the bottom, I guarantee you it came from New York Times. Now, how does Twitter does it? And now if I tweet this, something very interesting will happen. And I'm not going to tweet this. I'm going to show you what happens when you tweet this. When you do tweet it, the link will not even appear. The link will be completely omitted, and Twitter now is vouching for the source. It's doing this through a Twitter card. It shows a card with a summary of everything in that link. This is where you want to be. You want to be in a place where the links that you share all have their own card, where Twitter vouches for the authenticity of the source. And how it's done is by employing or deploying Twitter's own meta tags in your platform. So say you work for Ynet, you need to make sure each and every article is inside the code covered with Twitter tags. Now today, this is not even a brainer. Today, most publication platforms have some, if it's WordPress, you have a plugin that does it. If it's more sophisticated ones, there's third-party plugins that do it. If you have a publication with a budget, then for sure, the company who got the contract to make your website need to be pulled by the ears and say, go back and incorporate Twitter cards into our articles. When you incorporate automatically, the card will automatically populate the image tag with the exact URL of the image. It will take the title from the title of the article. It will take the description from the description of the article. it will take the author, which is very important, from the author of the article. It will put the @ of the author, and it will assure the source in the content and make sure the Ynet tag is here and the Ynet.com is here. So I cannot stress more the importance of making sure that your own publication websites where you all work for incorporate Twitter tags in their platforms. And of course, this is part of the services that I give, and I would be more than happy to give more advice on this. But I want to show you just for a moment, what does it mean, Twitter cards, code-wise? I know it will be gibberish for most of you, but it's important that you see it, because I'm going to show you something a little bit more deep into it, and we're going to cover in our third session a way for you to go about it if your publication doesn't solve this for you. So to understand how the code looks like, we're going to have to do something very simple that I'm sure most of you know, is do a right click and click view page source. I'm going to use a plugin here with your permission because it's going to organize something that is not so organized on New York Times themselves. Now, what we see here, this is the code, the HTML code that the browser deciphers as this specific article. We'll go back. This specific article. This article of the New York Times, climate is wait a minute, we'll do this copy paste. This code is actually presenting as this article. And if I'll do a search, you'll see that the title is the same title, climbing, it's taking a roll on the roll for voters. Now, what is important is, where is your Twitter tags? So we're going to do another search, and we're going to look for Twitter. And here are the Twitter meta tags. What you see here is a set of meta tags that tells Twitter, anytime this article is being shared on Twitter, this is what you do. You're going to take, for your Twitter sharing title, this. You're going to take for Twitter sharing description, this. And you're going to take for an image, this URL here. And there's going to be an alternative name for the image if the image is not available. And the card type is summary large image. This is done on each and every article published by New York Times, but by, I'd say, 99.9% of all big publications in the United States. In Israel, this is not the case, unfortunately. What you see here is what we see when we share Haaretz article. It's incomplete. The title is fetched, the description is replaced by 3 little stars, and the image is fetched. It looks weird, and it doesn't make use of something very valuable that Twitter offers you as a publication. Twitter offers you another 90 extra characters to inform a user at the moment he sees the tweet. What Haaretz did is they gave those extra 90 characters up. They don't use it. Not only that, the title of the article is longer than what is allowed by a Twitter card, which is, if I'm not mistaken, 70 characters. So it means most users will have no, in this case, I think this is not a problem. It enters inside, but in some cases, in Israel, a lot of the publications will have titles that Twitter cannot handle. They are more than 50 characters. So this is what happens on Haaretz. The thing is, I've checked most of the big publications in Israel, and I gave you some examples. So, of course, this is what happens when we share a New York Times article. Everything is perfectly in place. We have a title, a description, the source of the publication, and an image wrapped in a perfectly appearing card where the link is not appearing anymore. This is Haaretz, we just saw it. This is Israel Hayom. Israel Hayom is probably the closest possible to a good use of the tags of the Twitter cards. They have the title, they have the image, although instead of having description, somehow they feed into the description the category of the article. It may be a conscientious decision, it may be not. Again, Twitter gave them 90 characters extra for anyone sharing that link. They use just the category for it. They can do better. This is a yediot.co article. It's actually non-existent. There is no card. Now, Twitter is doing their best to try and decipher from what they find there and see an image and see a title and see something that may look like a description, or they take even the few first paragraphs. But this is where you don't want to be. You don't want Twitter to try and figure out what you're sharing. And this is a Ma'ariv article. Again, the title is there. Description is replaced by 3 brackets. I don't know why, but it's a code error. This is a Kan news article shared from kan.org.il/news. Again, non-existent. So Twitter is trying their best to figure out what's going on there. So they're rendering it as a very disadvantageous card. Ynet, again, non-existent. Twitter is doing their best. And this is, of course, what happens when there's no card at all. When Twitter cannot figure out at all what kind of structure there is existing. So obviously, each and every platform needs to be checked for itself, but most big platforms in Israel don't incorporate the tag, and I've checked these. Only the New York Times as a reference does it right, but everyone is not doing it. These guys don't have a card, and Haaretz and Israel Hayom have a card, but it's not implemented very correctly. One more thing that I'd like to give you as a tool, just before, let's cover the questions. לא נמשכת התצוגה, שמתי לב. הפלטפורמה דרך כלל לא נמשכת התצוגה, מקדימה של האתר, כמו בפייסבוק. Stav, can you open the mic and clarify this? Hello? סתיו?
כן, כן, אני פה, בסדר, הפתרון של קארטס הוא מעולה, פשוט צריך להשתמש בו.
Okay, so I actually answered the question. Let's see more. Is there a recommended plugin for WordPress? There's many. There's many plugins for WordPress. I don't know if there's, for sure, there's ones better than others. I'm going to share my private contacts. I know experts who can give me an answer if there is one plugin better than others. For sure, when I used WordPress a lot, I used a plugin that enabled me control on everything. Where do the title comes from? Where do the description comes from? Absolute control. I just don't know. It was 3 years ago the last time I touched it, so I'm sure there's better things now. I can answer privately on what's better. Another question, Yair. האם אפשר שהאתר יחליט להכניס כרטיס שונה לכל אחת מהכתבות שלו, כדי שתוצג האחרת? יאיר, if I understand your question correctly, you want to be sure that each article presents with a different tag. Is this correct? How I understand your article, your question?
מה שרציתי לשאול זה שהצגת את זה כאילו היתרון תמיד זה למשלוח תמונה גדולה, ויכול להיות שבחלק מהמקרים עדיף דווקא שתהיה תמונה קטנה, נגיד אם יש תמונה שהיא די גרועה לכתבה, אז להציג אותה בגדול זה דווקא יכול להיות קצת turn off בפיד. אז השאלה זה אם צריך, אם כשאתר בא ובונה כרטיס כזה ומשתיל אותו אצלו, אם הוא חייב לדבוק כל הזמן באותו מבנה, או שיש לו את האפשרות לבחור מבנים שונים ולהתאים אותם לכתבה הספציפית.
Okay, this is a very good question. You can choose between two cards. There's two cards that Twitter offers. The summary with a big image and summary with a small image. In a moment, we're going to cover the importance of visuals, and you'll see that even when you're sharing a low-quality image, you want to present that low-quality image with as much screen real estate as you can. And the reason here is purely psychological. It doesn't matter what type of image you share. Images catch attention better than text. So we'll cover this in a moment, but to answer specifically your question, you can actually denote one type of article into a small image summary, while the rest of your articles are large image summary. There's a way to do this code-wise, whether it exists as a plugin. To the best of my memory, yes. You can have a plugin that enables you on the moment of publishing the article to decide whether it's being published with a summary small image card or a summary large image card, at least on WordPress. But if you're working for a bigger publication, this could be easily coded into the CRM of the website. I hope I answered the questions. למשל שברירת המחדל תהיה שטוויטר יציג את תמונת הכתבה. Okay, so I think I answered. So I see no more questions on this. Let me just show you one very valuable Twitter tool that unfortunately only real professionals know about and coders, but I show this to all public engagement audiences that I do, especially from your sector as journalists and professionals. This is a tool, a little bit like a trick, to check any type of link that you're sharing and see how Twitter sees it and verify whether you have a card there or not. So let's take for a second the New York Times article and plug it through the card validator. So Twitter is checking it now and saying in return, I found a card. The card for your website would look exactly like this on Twitter. Now let's take this platform, for example, and share it here. And Twitter will return no card found. That means that would be presented as bare link with very low click-through rates. Now, just as an exercise, you guys have any suggestion for an Israeli platform to check? Just throw a newspaper and I'll check their article. Okay, so I'll choose one. Let's take globes. Okay, Khan. I'm copying Gil the article you just mentioned and putting it through the card validator, and you'll see what Twitter sees of Khan. They see a card, summary tag found, card loaded successfully. That means you have a card in Khan, although no one took care of that card. No one linked the image of the article to the card. This is a coding problem that could be easily solved, making sure that anyone who's sharing Khan articles will have a better view of, and it would lead to better views of your own articles eventually. So this is an existing card, simply maladjusted. We're moving on, unless I'll wait 10 seconds to see if anything is, if there's any other questions. Please, Stav, yes. You can open mic, probably easier than typing, and it will be faster for everyone.
מעולה, אני אשאל, פשוט אין פה נציגים מהחדשות שלנו וחבל. אני רוצה לשאול, הם כאילו החשבון שיותר השתמש בזה, איך זה עובד בפועל? איך הם צריכים להתקין את זה באתר פעם אחת וזהו?
Absolutely, yes. The question was, how does it work in practice? How is it being installed? It all depends on the platform that runs your content management system, the CMS. If you're using some standard CMS for news article, news publishing, I can assure you there's already existing code there. If Khan is using some internally developed system, which I don't see the reason why, but maybe it's the case, then it was done by a company for sure. That company should be required to code this into the workflow. And then what happens is the publisher, when you're looking at the article before publishing, you have fields. You have a title field where the publisher puts the title. You have a description field where the description is filled. You tell the platform where to find the image, how to link the image. That platform that uploads the article should have one more section in it. And that section could be on full automatic pilot or with semi-control, which means if it's full automatic pilot, you just tell the platform, when I put a title in the title of the article, you simply copy it automatically to the title of the Twitter tag title. When I put a description, you copy it to the description. When I put an image, you copy it to the image. Some platforms give control, so I know for a fact that some publishers, and this is probably a trick you guys know of, and I'm going to say something that you for sure came across before. Have you ever came across an article, it's mostly on Facebook we see this, an article shared on Facebook with a very shocking image, and then when you click the article itself, it opens up, but the title is a bit different and the image is a bit different because when it's on the platform itself, it's with a much more moderate imaging and moderate way of titling. I'm sure many of you came across. If not, I can give you many examples. It happens on a daily basis. The reason and the way how it's done is, first of all, the reason is on social media, the shocking element brings a lot of views. So publishers are doing a small, it's a small dirty trick. On the website, the title is X and the image is Y, but the Twitter card elements are a bit different. they actually say that when this article is shared on social media, share it with a different title, a little bit more shocking, and a different image, a little bit more shocking. And this is a trick that publishers do to draw more attention to their links and click-through rates through social media, although on the real website, everything looks very nicely respectable with no shady images and shady titles. So I hope I answered the question, Stav. Are we good to move on? Perfect. Visuals. Of course, it connects intimately to the cards issue, and I cannot stress more than what I'll do in the next following 2 or 3 slides how important visuals are. But to base everything that I'm going to say, I shared with you, and when you get the presentation, you can look at it yourself. Twitter did their own research on millions and millions of tweets. It's statistically, empirically proven. Tweets with visuals get between 28 to 35% more engagement. To say even more, when we instructed our Israeli diplomats deployed around the world, when they use Twitter, we simply told them, never tweet without an image. Always find an image to tweet with. It doesn't even matter how good the image is, find an image, because the real purpose of the image is actually to stop someone from, scrolling tweets with a thumb on your tweet and have him the moment to read what you have to say. That's the real purpose of the image. The image has no other purpose other than, at least in our professional domains. I'm not speaking about people who use Twitter a little bit like Instagram, where they share, fashion stuff. The real advantage of using an image is to literally, when someone is browsing with a thumb on their feed, to stop browsing when they see your tweet and have a moment, read what you have to say. Because any way we turn it, images have an innate ability to speak with the human brain much more intuitively than text. A text would need a fraction of a second more to get to skim through it and to understand the concept. An image right away makes sense. So I gave you here an example. This is a tweet, a very long tweet. It maximizes all 280 characters. It goes against many of Twitter's own recommendations. Twitter says stay under 100 if you want to get processed by brains as fast as you process an image. There's no way I would have gotten this tweet attention as it got with 1,000 likes and 1,000 conversations. No way to get it unless I used an image. So I did exactly that. I had a complicated message to pass, and I needed people to stop for a moment and have a look at it. It's my interest that if I take the time and research and collect numbers and do everything, it's my best interest that people will at least stop and read what I have to say. So the only way to do this is use an image. There's no way to stop people more than what text can stop them other than using an image. And of course, when using an image, your best guide is appealing to emotion. It's statistically proven again and again that an image that appeals to emotion is almost intuitively grabs attention and demands attention, it's hardwired psychologically in us to stimulate emotion with an image rather than be more intellectual. And this is something I share with you as a lesson after 5 years of working with Israeli diplomats in some arenas where the Israeli narrative it's an understatement to see its disadvantages. The only way I could prove to our diplomats spread all around the world that they can get attention to what they have to say, no matter how complicated, because I was always getting back, yes, but our message is complicated, the other side is, it's very simple, we are in the nuance, they are in the black and white. And I showed them again and again, you can be nuanced, you can be sophisticated, you can be in the shades of gray rather than in the black and white, as long as you match an image that can intuitively speak to emotion, because anytime you do that, you stop the person and he will go into the shades of gray. And in this specific case, what I've done is I needed to stimulate emotion on an audience that I had an interest that will read the tweet. This tweet was not directed, of course, to the base audience. I wanted this tweet to stimulate and to stop those who do not agree with my take on what Jerusalem is. And the only way I did it was through choosing an image where in a very audacious, some people will even say condescending way, the Israeli flag is flapping on top of the Dome of the Rock. And the proof that I have that this tweet was highly targeting my thesis audience, those who do not agree with me rather than those who agree with me, is how the likes are lesser than the comments, because when people like it, they either retweet it or like it. When people don't agree, they comment. And as you can see, I had more commenters than likes. And this is my measurement and showing that if you're using the right image, you can pinpoint and target and micro-target the right audiences, even with more complex messages in the shades of gray rather than the easy, popular black and white messaging. So this is a lesson to many of you journalists who are, well, your work is in the shades of gray rather than the populist black and white messaging. And it's actually our service to the public to you know, put the shades of gray out there and the complexities out there. So images are a very effective tool to make people stop and read what you have to say. Now, some technicalities when sharing an image. Depending on how you consume Twitter, images are being rendered differently. So for example, on a mobile, Twitter would prefer a more 16:9 ratio, which is more like a, you know, like an LCD screen ratio. On the web platform, Twitter will render things at 4:3, which is more like the old TV's ratio. There's many ratios and it changes a lot. You don't need to really break brains on it. There are services out there that literally cut the image for you to make it ideally fitting to all types of platforms on Twitter with averages. I shared with you one. It's called Image Cropper. It cuts images for all types of platforms to fit perfectly all types of platforms, and it's constantly updated on the Twitter cutter. All you have to do is drag an image here. It will give you the image cut already to the best ratios to appear on Twitter. it's really a no-brainer. Let's see if there's more. הגודל המומלץ לתמונה בפיד של טוויטר היא 630 או 120. True, the thing is, you don't even need to, it was easy for me to share Twitter themselves, even publish from time to time, even when they do UI changes, what is the ideal ratio. I thought that it would be easier to share images or to show the image cutter, because then you don't really need to memorize those image ratio pixels. You just drag an image, and these guys are updating themselves whenever there's a change on Twitter. So it will just give you always the right cutting measurement. Another question is, oh, this is a good one, by Moshe Ronen. Is there זכויות יוצרים, publication rights problems with sharing an image? Now here, I'm gonna put everything I say in quotation marks because I'm not a legal expert. What I can share with you is that this issue of rights on images, it was a big, and still is a big issue when it comes to the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs after, not on social media, more like on articles, on internal platforms. Diplomats shared images with rights reserved, and the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs got sued. And we had a big debate. And the debate was specifically on Twitter, because Twitter allows you to do something that is, I'm not sure if, definitely Instagram does not allow, but maybe Facebook does allow it too, I don't know. Twitter allows you to share a tweet with someone else's image. And I'll show you an example. Open image in a new tab. So what I'm seeing here is the image corresponding with the New York Times article. It is hosted by New York Times. Now, if I download this image to my desktop and then publish a tweet with it, I definitely went against the publication rights of the owner of the image. But Twitter enables me to do something a bit tricky. Twitter enables me to tweet and say I want to tweet with an image, but instead of choosing the image from my computer, I'm putting here the New York Times link to the original, and I say open. Now, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't really know why and when, but what happened now is I'm tweeting with an image that never was downloaded by me. I'm just saying to Twitter, when you show my tweet, show it with the image hosted by New York Times, and I don't even change the URL of the host. I'm not even lying about it. I'm telling Twitter simply present my tweet with an image found at that URL. Now, the debate here between within our legal department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was, does this constitute a breach of publication rights when I don't really do anything myself? I just tell a third-party platform to show my text with another third-party image. I guess the only one who can answer this is your own legal departments. What I can say is, because it was never decided, we had some diplomats, some of which, and including myself, keep on using this method, because if anything, if there's any complaint by the owners of the rights of the image, those complaints should come to Twitter, because Twitter is hosting the image, or Twitter is relaying that image to the real host. As far as I'm concerned, I'm just saying to Twitter, present my text here with the image found on New York Times site. I don't know if it's answering your question, but at least it's something that we debated on, and it should be answered by a legal expert. I can tell you that we had a debate even within the legal experts in the ministry.
מאוד מעניין, תודה.
Another question by Yair. How much does it differ if it's an image or a video? Okay, so this is also a very good question. The reason why it says here between 28% and 35% is for visuals in general is that videos are getting 28% and visuals, images are getting 35%. So images will get you more attention than videos. Videos have another advantage to them that will not cover here. It has to do with a cross-platform advantage. Videos, their ability to grab attention or to grab the person who already started it is much more effective than any text out there. So if you're sharing a video, your interest is to share a video on a very complicated a subject that would require a series of many tweets to cover. Because once you got someone's attention to click play, you can pass so many narratives in a video that will take you hundreds of tweets. But if your interest is to work en masse, bettering your ability to engage audience with your own Twitter account, I would say go for the image. It gets much more attention to to what you have to say in writing, and images are much easier to come by, much less complicated to produce. As a rule of thumb, go with images unless you have a very complicated issue and a very good video out there, and then definitely go with a video. But I'm going to share another reason why. Sorry, go again?
What about a GIF?
Okay, a GIF is probably the ultimate combination between all the advantages of a video and the advantages of an image. GIF is perfect for attention. There's one disadvantage with GIF that I'm going to cover right now in the next slide. And then my recommendation is, if you have a good GIF and you're willing to lose the advantage that I'm going to give you in a moment, then go with a GIF. But probably an image, if I need to, if you need to tell me you can use only one, I will choose image, not a GIF. I'll lose the advantages I get from a GIF for the advantages I get from an image. And you'll see why in this slide. So this is probably the most, I'd say, open secret on Twitter. When you use a tweet with an image, you can tacitly bring in on the conversation up to 10 other people. Remember, we said that when you're tweeting, it's actually considered spamous behavior if you're stacking a lot of usernames in your tweet. And of course, it doesn't make any sense and it doesn't look good. But what if I tell you there's a way to bring in up to 10 other Twitter users to be notified each and every time? Not only when you tweet the tweet, they will get notification on their Twitter wall every time someone engages with your tweet. And the way to do this, is by using a feature that I can tell you that within the developer community of Twitter, there are discussions. Some people call to sunset this feature and cancel it. Some people say you should keep this feature. This feature started from the first day Twitter enabled sharing of images. Back then, Twitter did not decide yet which type of social media it wants to be, whether type of like Instagram social media or Facebook social media. Back then, images were ways of people sharing, like I had a beer with my buddies yesterday, and tag your 10 buddies having a beer with you. So for example, sorry, this is not what I wanted to show. For example, when you share a tweet and attach an image to it, and again, we'll take the New York Times image. Now, when you write a tweet and share an image to it, doesn't matter what's the source of the image, Twitter enabled you to say, yeah, this is the beer I had with my buddy David and my buddy David and my buddy Benoit and my buddy Simon. Done. So now David, Benoit, and Simon are tagged on the image. When Twitter developed this, Twitter was yet deciding which type of social media it is. Now it's clear that Twitter is a social media of sharing information, and this is not relevant anymore. And within the professional discussions, Twitter acknowledges that it's no longer used. Very few people use it to tag their friends because people don't use Twitter en masse. People don't use Twitter to share pictures of what they did with their friends yesterday and tag them. So it's obsolete. But the thing is, those who use it stand so strongly behind it that it becomes very difficult for Twitter to sunset this feature. And why do I tell you this? I tell you this because for me, it's one of the most powerful features in Twitter. And the reason why it's so powerful is because it enables you. Remember, we said it's really not in your favor to tweet without an image. So if you're already tweeting, and every tweet that you tweet has an image, you have the ability to tacitly bring in on the conversation 10 other people. And this is something that only limited by the imagination. Say, for example, you're tweeting about Yair Netanyahu, okay? It's very polemic, it's a polemic subject, and you have something to show, and it's a legitimate piece of journalism that concerns Yair Netanyahu. So of course, you're going to tweet with the @ of Netanyahu. That will bring him into the conversation. Now, say for example, and in the next session you will learn how to do this, say for example, you bring into that conversation 5 of the most diehard supporters of Yair Netanyahu, because you know systematically these guys always stand up for him and they have a lot of followers. So you bring 5 of them into the picture, and you also bring 5 other voices of reason that you yourself respect, and they have themselves a lot of impact and say. What you've just done is you're not only calling Yair Netanyahu into the conversation and he can choose whether to do it, yes or not. You're also dragging into the conversation 5 of his biggest supporters, and chances are they will be commenting your tweet even before Yair Netanyahu has. Remember, each time one of them is doing anything with your tweet, he takes your message to their followers. Imagine if only 1% of their die-hard Yair Netanyahu fans have a chance of reading that piece of news you had and have an opportunity to change their mind, or even just have a more constructed view about Yair Netanyahu. That's how powerful this feature is. Bringing people into the conversation is not just to bring your friends or your enemies or supporters, or it's about creating a mix that by bringing them into the conversation, you're signaling them not only tacitly, I would like your opinion on it, you're also luring them into a public debate that the one unifying denominator of that public debate is that grain of information that you had to say to begin with. So this is your ability, in the most cynical form of putting it, to penetrate new audiences with your logic, with your narratives, but also to use Twitter the way it was designed to be used, as a public agora where people exchange ideas. So if you facilitate this agora formation on your tweet, you're basically becoming a center of debate. And this is exactly where you want to be. You want your tweets to be a center for debate, because that centrality will bring more attention, more followers over time, and more references from colleagues and from readers alike. So that's how you do, that's the added advantage when it comes to using tweets over videos. I hope, Yair, this answers the second part of your question, whether to choose an image or a GIF. That specific ability to tag over an image, which you don't have the ability to do the same on a GIF, for me, makes images more advantageous than GIFs. Although I will say, admittedly, that GIFs, if they're good and well used, they would bring way more engagement to the tweet itself, but they don't have the agora ability of generating a conversation on top of your tweet as a foundation. They're more like appealing to humor, more like psychological visual effects. The agora effect done by tagging is unique only to images. No videos and no GIFs can do this. Any other questions on images? Okay, so of course the example shows how to tag, where you can search people to tag, and of course I'm going to share this HTML presentation with you, and you're going to have all those buttons and tools available for yourself. We're going back to the presentation, and we're moving to the last section.
I had a question.
Please.
About, I saw for the first time, and I'm using Twitter all the time, that you can add a description to the photo.
Yes.
Is it a description that you see, you can see in every tweet, or it's something that is more for like an alternative description for blind people, that it's the programs that help blind people use it?
Okay, again, a very good question. It depends on the platform. Some platforms, for example, mobile platforms, if the user of the mobile platform, when they, as a user, you can say, I'm visually impaired. And when you signal that you're using a mobile phone of visually impaired, Twitter, when you fill in those blanks in the data, Twitter will interpret the metadata you put on the image into text. And for the visually impaired, when they look at Twitter, they will get basically their machine machine read the tweet, and then the machine says an image attached to this tweet reads as crowd flocking in Tiananmen Square, where someone is trying to stop a tank with a bouquet of roses. So that feature that you've just mentioned, add a description, is actually designed for people with disabilities. Now, some platforms actually display to all users this alternative text. I don't see, unless you really, your work involves people of disabilities, and you would like to have them as, of course, I'm not, everyone should do this if you have the time, but we're all, our work is a function of time and effort.
Does it affect the search engine? Because let's say if I add more text as a description, even if people regularly doesn't read it, maybe for the search engine, when someone is looking for a tweet in a specific subject, maybe it helps my tweet to rise up because it has more words.
You know what? This is something I've never researched. It makes sense because Twitter signed in 2019 or 18, Twitter signed an agreement with Google. The Google search spider has access to all Twitter data. So when you're looking for content on Twitter, on Google, Google has the authorization and ability to present to you Twitter data and tweets. So maybe it just logically makes sense, because Twitter do look at tags like that. Maybe your tweets will be more available for Google searches on the topic you're sharing content on. That's one advantage. A second advantage may come from Twitter's own algorithm choosing which tweets to prioritize on the feed of your followers, choosing your tweet over another. That one is less likely because I've spoken with people on the team of the Twitter algorithm. Their algorithm is way less, intrusive than Facebook, for example. Their algorithm is based mostly on who you're engaging more and tweets you're opening more. It goes less in reading the text, but it's worth the test. If by testing you realize that your tweets get more exposure, I'll be more than happy if you share it with me, because so far I couldn't find the reason to justify the extra time of explaining what is in the picture to the people who I advise how to use Twitter. Any more questions about images? Simply open the mic and ask it. It's faster than the text. Hello? Was that a question, or we move on? Okay. We're moving on. The last topic is packaging. And packaging is probably the most associated with psychological effects than anything else. And although on the importance scale is the least important, I chose to give you a quote by Steve Jobs here, that packaging is a theater. And it literally does create a story. And the reason why we all need to play a little bit like we're in the theater is simply look at the statistics. Twitter's publish themselves. They have 6,000 tweets every second, 300,000 tweets per minute, 5 million per day. There's so much content out there. And Twitter is known to be a very fast-moving social media platform. So we browse through tweets, we're skimming them with our thumb and scrolling them, and our own tweets are fighting for attention with so many others. So one of our ways to really jump over the pack is take care of the small details, and packaging is indeed the small detail. It has nothing to do with how you text, how you verbalize yourself, and what image you chose to create what emotion. It has to do more with how you wrap things around your tweet. And I chose to give a few, just to expose yourself to few methodologies to simply stand out and be different, because being different means a thumb stopping the scroll and taking a look at what you actually have to say to the world. So the first is, of course, using Twitter polls. Twitter polls are engaging. That means if you have something to say and you want to use a poll to stop people and engage with it and somehow react to what you have to say, you probably need to verbalize differently what you have to say and pass it more as a question and maybe be clever on how you put each and every answer so things fall in place logically. But the fact that you're using a poll already, and if you're polling on, and the topic behind it, the hashtag behind it, is a popular topic on Twitter, then already you are using a little bit more packaging power on your side to stop someone, because a poll, because of its engagement, is demanding a little bit more attention and curiosity. It's mostly the curiosity side, because you're asking an open question, and within the answers, a person intuitively find his own position, but it's all masked. So to see where people stand vis-a-vis his own position, he needs to click it, and needing to click it forces him to read it more carefully. And sometimes if the answer serves my own personal position, then I would share it, and if it doesn't, if the common answer doesn't, then I would probably comment it. But this is where you want people to be. You want people to either share your tweet, retweet it, or comment it, because whenever they do this, they take the tweet from your followers to theirs. So a poll is a very clever way of doing it. It requires a little bit more creativity and analytics, brain power on your side, how to take a message and pass it as a question, which the answer to passes tacitly within the answers, and then you create an engagement for the audience. Another advantage for using polls is that it doesn't stop with the poll itself. It actually gives you moed bet. It gives you a round B when the poll ends, and then you have the results. If the results confirm your pre-existing thesis on the subject, then it's raising for a slam. If the result doesn't, it gives you another opportunity to attack the same subject from a different angle. So polls are a very effective tool of doing things, and it creates a lot of attention. And attention on polls is measured by the votes rather than the shares or the likes. What counts here, and polls are a very good way. Let me open that poll on Twitter and you'll see why. Because when we look at any type of tweet, Twitter gives us this data. It gives us impressions and engagements. Now, many of us ask ourselves, okay, impressions are nice, but I have 100,000 impressions and I got only 117 likes. How is it possible? And when we don't use a poll, we are very easily questioning these pieces of information. And I'll show you how it looks when it's outside of a poll. So we'll go to my wall and we'll take something that didn't succeed much. Let's take this one. So let's look at it and see what Twitter gives us back as statistics. And you see Twitter is saying this tweet had 2,500 impressions. So I asked myself, how do I get only 11 likes on 2,500 impressions? Twitter must have counted here things that they don't, someone browsed through it with his thumb, but never actually stopped and looked at it. They count as an impression. Polls gives a little bit more viability to the impressions, because on polls, 7,600 engagements means 7,600 votes, which is a larger slice of the impressions as opposed to what you get only by seeing the likes, the retweets, and the replies, which are quite solid for a poll that had 7,000 votes on it. So to validate impressions, it's much easier to do with polls, because polls gives you a viable count of those who are counted in the impressions and never clicked either the like, the share, the retweet, but they simply participated in the poll. You don't see this participation on a normal tweet, you just see the impressions. So poll is a good way, maybe not every day, but a good way of validating your impression numbers every once in a while. I'd say every week or 2 weeks or every month, run a poll. It will simply validate your impressions versus engagements data that you get on your tweets separately. And this is an added value on top of the engagement feature of a poll that enables you, raising for Islam and round B to go back to the same topic. Any question about polls? I move forward. Another packaging element is the use of rich text. And again, I go back to the topic title. As you remember, the title is to stand out. So in the game of standing out, you're looking to be different from what 99.9% of the users are doing. And using rich text is a very efficient way of achieving this, because Twitter never gave the ability to have rich text inside a tweet. All texts in tweets, or at least the style by which they are being rendered by browsers and applications, are decided directly by Twitter themselves. So if you type text, it's Twitter who chooses the font, it's Twitter who's choosing the size, it's Twitter who's choosing whether to bold it or italicize it. All the decisions are made on Twitter's side. So obviously, if you have a trick in your can that enables you to choose yourself, whether it's with italicized or bold, or even change the font of a tweet from serif to sans serif, these are small advantages that make you stand out. Now the trick how to do this, here I use it in a quote. So I italicize the quote and I boldify the source of it. The way to do this is to use a trick called Unicode Characters, and it's in the presentation. So right at the end, when I share the presentation link with you, you're all going to have the links to these two tools. To do italicize, I use a tool called Tweetalics. So any text that you type here, you can choose how to present it using Unicode. So I can choose to present it bold, italic bold, or normal bold. I can have it in black letter. I can have it in script. I can have it in serif or sans serif style. And of course, take down the bold. I can do all those games using Unicode. So this is a very, very interesting tool. Again, this is not something to use all the time, but just to give an example, when you have something important to stress out, this is an ability to do this and stand out. So for example, this is my last tweet. I wanted to say that there's not only one first in Jared's video, there's actually two. So I put in bold the word two. Of course, this is not available for 99% of Twitter users, but using the Tweetalics tool, I can put the word two in bold, and you can do this with anything you choose. You can stress things by putting bold or italicized. The only problem is, to the best of my knowledge, but we need a computer expert on this one, UTF characters are not available in Hebrew. So tweeting in Hebrew won't give you this advantage. This is more for the English or any foreign language users of, or at least Latin-based languages, users of Twitter. Another a good tool that I use is Text. It enables you to do something else. It enables you to use Unicode to actually underline words. So stress this, simply copying and pasting each one of those forms on Twitter will give you the same result. And this is a trick of putting underline under a word. Again, these are all tricks in the package form, but their purpose is one, standing out. Any questions on the Unicode text, rich text? Okay. I move on to the last trick before we finish this section, and then we'll open it for questions. The last trick is even more rare than seeing the rich text, and this trick is rare because it's most seldom to find the opportunities to use it. But when using it, it makes your tweets much more intuitively read and understood when you're using it, other than not using it. And I'll give an example. Some usernames and hashtags on Twitter, especially in English, when you want to conjugate them or complete them, while using them in the sentence, remember we said it's more advantageous to use and weave in the usernames and hashtags into your sentence rather than stacking them. But let's say you want to tweet about 3D printing, but the hashtag is 3D print. So I can either use the hashtag 3D printing, which is way less used on Twitter, but if I want to address my tweet to the 3D print industry at large, it would be much more advantageous for me to use 3D print rather than 3D printing. So and in this case, I even show another example with the word Hebrew U. So the hashtag for the Hebrew University is HebrewU. But for foreign audiences, take the average American. When they read Israeli at HebrewU researchers, the word HebrewU means nothing to them, or to 99.9% of them. What does it mean, HebrewU? So completing it with the word university is very advantageous for me because it makes my narrative more intuitively understood. The thing is that if I write Hebrew University in one word, if I write Hebrew University in one word, I obviously won't be tagging the real username of HebrewU, but a fake username of Hebrew University. So the trick around it, when you want to connect together a hashtag like drama with or verbalizing it with dramatizing, and still keep your conversation within the drama drawer, but say a word that actually fit your sentence, or use usernames that are cut in half and completing them to make more intuitive sense when someone reads your sentence, is to simply break them in half with invisible characters. Now, this is impossible to achieve doing it manually, so I literally coded a tool that does it into this presentation. So when it will be shared with you, you can do this yourself from this presentation. So anything you type here, like hashtag drama, and then the ending, tizing, and then you click here, it will connect the two words together, but in a way that Twitter breaks them in half. And the examples to this, to see that it works, is when you paste this. So they are constantly dramatizing the situation. What you see here is when I pasted it, although I copied dramatizing, what happens here, I'm tagging this conversation to the drawer drama, but using the hashtag in a more fluid way within the tweet. And I verbalize it into dramatizing. Again, this is not what will make your Twitter account the best in Israel, but these are small things in the packaging that makes a difference and make you stand out and make you a little bit more intuitively readable by the human brain, rather than forcing your grammar into hashtags that sometimes don't make sense. Last question about this, or we are going to the end of the presentation. This is already the next lesson we'll have, which will be, if this one didn't bring a lot of new information, I assure you the advanced search on Twitter will blow your mind. It's been a pleasure, and looking forward for the next session where we're gonna delve into really unleashing the power of all this big data on Twitter.